I don't know if I have it in me to devote 2 years of my life making, and I kid you not, over 2 literal days worth of videos start to finish talking about a book series like I did with Descendants of a Bookworm. But that's not to say I'm done talking about light novels. The series that infested my mind since I first watched the anime back in winter 2021 seemed ripe for the picking. That's right, I'm talking about what should have been an isekai darling, instead shafted hard by a piss-poor adaptation that ruined any spectacle with poorly done CG, and inadvertently spoils key parts of the story by the sheer fact it's a visual medium. Today I wanted to talk about the first 5 books, and loosely what I consider the first arc of So I'm a Spider, So What, which just so happens to correspond to what the 2021 anime adapted. But before we go ahead and get into that, why not hit the subscribe button so you can stay up to date on light novel content from me. Starting life like so many other isekai franchises, So I'm a Spider, So What began serialization on Shosetsuka ni Naro by Hokinababa at the end of May 2015. Wow, looks like I missed releasing this video on the 10th anniversary, but mazel tov. And by the end of that same year, it got snagged for light novel treatment by Fujimi Shobo. Unlike most other light novel franchises out, this one's actually finished. 16 volumes in total, and it's a fairly packed story without much fat to trim. That tells me the author had a solid idea for the story they wanted to tell from the start, and didn't get sidetracked along that path, which is honestly sad that that's something praiseworthy these days. So with a quick success on their hands, Kadokawa tapped Kakashi Yasuhiro for a manga adaptation starting only a few weeks after the first novel was published. He didn't have much information on the series he was drawing a manga for, and seemed a bit intimidated by the task, apparently. But capitalism's gotta cash in when it can, with a pretty well-received adaptation coinciding with the novels. But one manga isn't enough to contain this franchise, as a spin-off starring the multiple personalities of our main character, don't worry, I'll get into that later, followed in 2019, with the tragic anime adaptation by Millipensi hitting in winter 2021. Now, if you go and look at the ratings for this series, you might think I'm just being contrarian or obtuse, but understand that the writing carries this anime, not the animation, storyboarding, or direction. In terms of what this actually is, it's a reincarnated isekai story following in the footsteps, or perhaps slime trail, of franchises like That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, while pulling major world mechanics and power systems from JRPGs like Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, an action that's much more in line with something like Monster Hunter. You'll notice I mentioned a lot of video games, and an isekai that also features a lot of video game RPG mechanics as well, being the main sources of inspiration for this series. That's because at its core, this is a lit RPG novel series that references levels, stats, and resources as part of its story. The actual system aspect of it, not just in an intuitive sense. Now, I'm on the record pretty damn often for being harsh on other franchises for those sort of elements, mostly because they don't make a ton of sense in the context of their stories. And hey, this particular series is the reason I hold that resentment. The RPG elements in this book matter, and they're implemented well. While not as talked about as some of the other contemporary isekai franchises like ReZero, Overlord, or Konosuba, So I'm a Spider, So What is a not-so-hidden gem overshadowed by other series that got much more polished anime adaptations. It is still a pretty big success and enjoyable series, but I'm still left wondering what might have been had we gotten a much better anime adaptation, as those do inject a lot of public interest into a franchise. But before I can get into why the anime fails and what the books do better, we should probably talk about plot. And that right there is your spoiler warning for both the books and the anime. I'm covering this in broad strokes because there's 24 episodes of an anime and 5 volumes of a light novel covered, and while the details differ, the major events do remain the same. I won't go into every detail because you should honestly read these books. They're pretty good. An average Japanese high school shut-in gamer girl, put an asterisk on that, suddenly wakes up in a cramped egg where upon breaking free, she finds herself surrounded by a bunch of huge-ass spider monsters. Obviously she's freaking out about that, but her situation is pretty damn clear. She's also a spider monster, and she's been reincarnated per the popular online trope that dominated web novels in 2015, when this series was originally written. She barely gets time to process that though, because she notices that her freshly hatched siblings are engaging in some cannibalism, and an absolutely massive spider monster that sets off all the alarm bells for dangerous is snacking on a few of her freshly hatched offspring as well. so she books it out of that mess to avoid the whole death thing. This introduces a few things to us quite well. Our main gimmick for the first half of the series, the titular spider reincarnation, and our protagonist's personality as well. While not quite fourth wall breaking at this point, she is at least genre aware and comedic in tone. From there, our little spider remembers what preceded these crazy events, briefly considering she might not even be an actual reincarnation, before deciding it really doesn't matter. Whatever the circumstances are, it doesn't really change her predicament. She's a baby spider now and just wishes she had a way to find out some more information. If only she was in a light novel or something, then she could gain an OP cheat ability like appraisal. That's when a robotic sounding voice rings out in her head, speaking in her native Japanese, saying that she has 100 skill points. And hey, it's only gonna take 100 to acquire appraisal. Weird, but this does give her, and us by proxy, more information about the world. Skills exist, and that basically rules out her still being on Earth. So she takes up the Divine Voice temp on its offer, and acquires the appraisal skill only to learn how absolutely useless it is at low levels. And that right there sets up how skills work, and also how important levels are. Cool. From there, our spider sets up a home, eats one of her sibling corpses that she found when she gets desperate, unlocking a nasty sounding skill in the process, finds an egg on a fleeing human, fails repeatedly at opening said egg for food, barely scrapes out a win against some other monsters by relying on her thread and poison fang, while learning the basics of the world's leveling and skill system, and also discovering she can pretty much fully recover any damage upon leveling up. That's helpful when half your body's been burned away by acid. That's when some humans find her nest, burn it down, and chase her ass out. So she sets out to go power level for a bit and hone her techniques. After a particularly tough fight against a massive snake that somehow snuck up on her, she evolves into the small version of her species from the small, lesser version she originally was. Progress. But her trouble doesn't end there, as humans discover her again, chase her until she falls down a massive pit, and barely survives an attack on the way down from a huge-ass bee monster. Now she finds herself in the lower stratum of the massive continent-spanning labyrinth she was born into, named the Great El Roe Labyrinth. Cool, she has a name for the dark cave now. And as she tries to snag the prey that nearly killed her on the way down, her spider senses are tingling, and notices another one of those big-ass snakes. But before she can even react to it, a bigger fish shows up in the form of a super high-level earth dragon that shreds the snake like it was nothing. Let's introduce the Earth Dragon Araba, everybody. Let's give a round of applause. She manages not to get killed by hiding from him, which actually raises her stealth skill, but she's still on death's door here, and has to slowly capture stray bees while building a nest up the wall to escape. That goes well enough as she gains skill levels, and actually levels up to recover over the course of a few days. But Araba comes back and blasts her makeshift home away with a single breath attack that she miraculously survives. Close call, and she gets the message. She's not welcome. So she goes in the opposite direction Araba did to find her way back up to the upper stratum she came from. After exploring the lower stratum for a while, seeing the exact extent of power creep here, she finds a pretty big opening where a monkey-like monster tries to attack her. And this is where she realizes she's pretty much outmatched in terms of raw power. Good thing she has human-like intellect though, and outsmarts the monkey to land a killing blow. But just as she does, it lets out this nasty scream that seems sorta weird. Anyway, time to sleep. So she sets up camp, only to get woken up by a swarm of those same type of monkey monsters who launch a relentless stream of attacks, all for the sole purpose of ending her life. Scary stuff. Yeah, this is a stressful fight that nearly gets her killed a few times, but after she cleans up all the monkeys, she leveled up enough to evolve once more. This time, she goes with the small poison pterodactyl. With that crisis averted, she heads up the only path available to find the middle stratum at long last. And after leveling up her fire resistance, health auto recovery, and acquiring the pride skill which boosts proficiency gains, and also unlocks some major cheat abilities at a pretty steep cost she doesn't quite realize yet, she goes into the magma-filled hellscape that is the middle stratum full of fire dragons. This section of the story drags a bit, as it's a lot of our spider experimenting with her skills and developing tactics, but some of the major takeaways are is that she levels up her mental skills enough to unlock parallel minds. This creates a mental clone of herself, somewhat similar to a split personality disorder, but since she can divide the work, it essentially lets her focus on 2 tasks or more as the skill level increases at once. Next, she evolves into an actual strong spider monster finally named Zoa LA. So hey, she has some combat abilities now. She also snags Perseverance at this point, another cheat skill like Pride that lets her survive with 1 HP as long as she has mana. which is pretty good since she's not really using that right now. And lastly, she finally maxes out Appraisal and Detection, which causes her to be a bit disappointed that those two high-powered skills didn't upgrade into something better. Like, I don't know, Wisdom or something? That's when she gets a message from the Divine Voice temp saying her request has been submitted to an administrator, and high-ranking Administrator D is accepted and created the skill just for her. Okay, so, Administrator? That's new. The game nature of this world seemed weird, but she also never really questioned it until this point. Now that she knows that something like administrators exist, she's kind of aware that she's a game character, and that's a bit chilling. But Wisdom's pretty cool. While it raises her taboo skill, it also grants her another OP title with some major perks that essentially let her become the most powerful magic user in the series. But what's taboo exactly? Yeah, it's leveled up before this point, but this is where it really starts to matter. It's a skill whose level should never be raised, or so Appraisal says, and the fact that I'm mentioning it here means it comes up later when she maxes it out. But her first major goal for now would be to escape the labyrinth entirely, so she sets out on just that. Yeah, no real idea how long it's been since she was born, but she spots the huge spider monster from all the way back then she unaffectionately calls Mother, trudging through the middle stratum without a care. Just a quick heads up here, spider monsters are super weak to fire, and the fact Mother doesn't care tells you how strong she is. And approaching her ready to fight is a full-fledged fire dragon leading a pack of fire worms. Sounds like that could be a cool fight, right? Well, no, because Mother charges a breath attack, presumably one from the divine dragon power skill she has, and blows the approaching dragon army out of the way like it's nothing. Then she just heads on her merry way further down. Our spider is literally shivering in fear of Mother's immense power, basically proving that she's the strongest thing in this dungeon. The new magma like that breath attack made is the only way forward, unfortunately. So, as our spider tries to cross, she gets ambushed by that half-dead fire dragon Mother didn't quite kill. This fight is a huge struggle, but she barely manages to win due to her now heavy reliance on magic with the help from her parallel minds and wisdom. But as she basks in the glory of finally killing a full-fledged dragon, a man in black teleports right in front of her and tries to speak. I mean, she can't understand him at all, but one thing's clear, this dude is beyond her level of power. Why? Because he's an administrator, but that's when a smartphone from nowhere lands between them. Yeah, she couldn't even sense that being teleported in when she could sense this dude. What the hell? Well, turns out the person on the other end is Administrator D, and she basically just tells the man in black to back off and not interfere with the reincarnations. So, he pieces out, and then D speaks with our spider. Here it is, the explanation for where they came from. She explains that she brought everyone from the spider's class to that world when they died, and while she's not directly monitoring, she's definitely using our girl as a source of entertainment. And why would she do that? Well, because D is this world's most evil god, of course, so she tells her to keep struggling for her amusement, and maybe she'll find the answer she's looking for. With that, our spider leaves the middle stratum, evolves, maxes out taboo, gains more skills, and makes the mistake of helping out some random humans one day and even healing them. Surely that won't come back to bite her in the ass. So, taboo. That maxed out though. When that happens, the Divine Voice announces that information will be installed, and essentially you learn the truth of the world at that point. Or rather, it's real history. What the system is, why it exists, who led this world into its current situation, and above all else, the need to repent. Something that is constantly being spammed into your brain. While our spider does get why this information would be called taboo to the citizens here, she's left with a pretty bad taste in her mouth because basically, this world's already on the verge of collapse, which makes her want to ascend to the rank of administrator and escape this hellhole for good. Anyway, after grinding some levels in the lower stratum and seeing how busted the higher tier earth dragons are, specifically she can actually grasp Baraba's strength to the point she's training to overcome him to conquer her trauma before leaving the labyrinth. But before that, she's busy preparing for war. What war is that? Well, see, when she first encountered that fire dragon, what she noticed the most was how she got irritated at the thing for being in her way. Turns out those weren't her feelings, but Mother's through the use of kin control. Basically, our spider has reached enough strength that Mother is trying to exert control over her mind now, and she's not having any of that, obviously. She's already launched an attack back using her parallel minds. But that's just made Mother send in some soldiers to try and kill her, though she's not too worried, obviously. In fact, she already saw this coming, so she set traps and handily wiped out an army of pretty damn strong spider monsters without issue. Considering the 3 greater Terratechs are close to a dragon's level of power, and the arch Terratech that Mother sent actually is in that realm of power, our spider's pretty damn impressive now. After that, she encounters some rude humans who tried to attack her, killed most of them, but let some of the survivors go to lead her outside the labyrinth. So hey, now she can teleport out whenever she needs to with her newly leveled spatial magic, which means there's really just one last thing to do: clean up her business with Araba. So she sets the stage and sets out to go kill the Earth Dragon once and for all. All her fights to this point have been pretty tough, but the one with Araba puts her strength to the test in the purest sense. Araba comes at her with his all, and she responds. But unfortunately for him, as soon as he started taking this fight seriously, she already won the battle due to her latest OP skill pickup. Another 7 deadly sins skill, Sloth. Araba's stats and skills meant she couldn't really hurt him, but Sloth increases entropy in the system itself. And how that translates is it basically drains the stamina of monsters around her. So yeah, she essentially starved Araba to death through their fight, and inked out a pretty close victory. But still, victory's a victory. Though the fact that he accepted death due to her strength did leave a slightly bitter taste in her mouth, as she's always been struggling for survival, and with that, she ventures out into the wide world for the first time, destroying the human fort situated at the exit because they attacked her first, and pretty damn confident Mother can't stop her now because her fat ass can't fit out the exit. That's short-lived, because her parallel minds notice that despite whittling away at Mother's soul, which is the tactic they've been using, Mother's not really fighting back anymore. That's pretty weird, considering she'll die if she doesn't stop him. And the only way they can think to do that would be to kill the main body. But since our spider here has the heresy nullification ability, that's basically damage to the soul, so the fact that Mother has seemingly just accepted her fate is kinda setting off some alarm bells. That is until she springs into action, sends her massive spider army off to various corners of the labyrinth, and blasts a huge breath attack straight up, blowing a new hole through the roof of the whole damn place. The parallel minds try to reach out, but they can't get in contact with the main body anymore because the method they used to sneak into Mother's mind was through king control, and now she's blocking that channel. Fucking great. Not that an advanced warning would have done much, since Mother's fast as hell despite her huge size, and barrels towards the main body while casually blasting off breath attacks like it's nothing, and effortlessly reshaping the landscape itself. Absolutely terrifying, and justifying the Queen Terratech's status as a legendary monster. That's when the main body scrapes by with the teleport spell to go back to her old hunting grounds near the middle stratum, only to find a spider army laying in wait. Yeah, Mother read the whole situation, and that was our spider's first mistake, assuming she was just a dumb bug. But among the arch Terratech staring her down, she notices a weirdly human-shaped puppet thing that turns out to be a small, hand-sized Terratech called a puppet Terratech, a thing that controls a hardened thread exoskeleton and wields 6 huge swords without breaking a sweat. Also, the stats are all over 10,000, so basically about half of Mother's. The combined effort of this puppet and 3 arches puts her on the ropes, but after spamming magic enough to level up and squeeze out another clutch teleport, she sends all the arches to a lava bath in the middle stratum, inking out just enough experience points to evolve once more. So she takes the plunge and evolves into Xanahoroway, a monster that's on par with the Queen Terratech on the evolutionary tree, and the penultimate step on her long-term goal, evolving into an Arachne. That's an evolution she spotted a while back with Wisdom, but the first major perk of the current one, it has the Immortality skill. Yeah, she saw that on the skill list for 1,000,000 points, which is laughably impossible to get, mind you. But here, she actually has it. That means she can't die within the system. Enter D via smartphone to congratulate her on accomplishing this goal, where she explains that this is a species that's never existed before due to the previous evolutions basically having built-in self-destruct features in their rod attacks that kill enemies, but also their users. Because turns out, rot is the element that governs death itself, unless they have rot resistance, like our little spider picked up during her first trip to the lower stratum due to hunger desperation. Anyway, our little spider's not too happy with D after learning about the real history of this world, but honestly, D's just the one who provided the system itself. She's pretty uninvolved in the actual events that led to it being necessary, but all that info is why it's taboo in the first place, as native residents of this world would probably go crazy upon hearing this shit. But hey, does she really have time for all this when Mother's trying to kill her? No, not really. But Dee lets her in on a little secret. The attack she's doing right now with her parallel minds isn't within the bounds of the system, and as a result of that, her divinity field has been expanding. She didn't really understand when she unlocked that skill at first, but now she gets the picture, that it's basically the path to ascending to godhood. And that's when Dee remarks that she hopes our spider manages to do it someday. But hey, since Dee is in such a good mood, she basically fills our spider in on all the information she's been speculating about until now. That she died and was reincarnated into this world because her and her classmate's death were caused by the previous hero and demon lord attempting to kill Dee back on Earth. Yeah, Dee was a student in her class. But also, all of her classmates have been reincarnated except Dee herself. She stuck them in bodies that fit their soul's wavelengths or whatever, and the fact that she's a spider means it must match hers as well. That's interesting, considering most of the kids reincarnated as humans. Anyway, we get a concrete timeline for the first time in this series. That our spider has quite the leg up considering she hatched before most of her classmates were even born. And hell, they're all infants right now. Well, that's enough exposition, because Dee cuts the line and sends our spider back on her way, saying she hopes she can defeat her, being ominous about who exactly her is in this context, but we'll find out soon. Thus she embarks on her plan to wipe out Mother's spider army while dodging the big boss herself as well as the puppet Terratect, teleporting around the labyrinth until she gets 5 stars, and then pieces outside for the heat to die down. Things are going pretty great, until Dee's foreshadowing comes back to bite her in the ass. One of her parallel minds manages to make contact, telling her to get the hell out of Dodge because there's someone higher up on the food chain than Mother that's coming for the main body right now. But before she can even explain, there's a huge crash where a little girl lands on the shoreline where the main body was chilling. Yeah, it turns out, Mother just restored that link to locate her so this thing could come kill her. But what is it exactly? Well, as this mysterious girl tries to converse in this world's language, our spider's confused and basically just shakes her arm saying she can't understand. In the meantime, she tries to appraise and turns out it's blocked. Luckily, Wisdom has a cheat to get around the ruling class privileges the 7 deadly sin skills give out. And that's when she sees this kid's stats are all in the 90,000 range, species name is Origin Terratact, has the Ancient Divine Beast skill, just about every status and element nullification there is, as well as maxed out attack skills. And hey, she's rocking the Bonafide Demon Lord title. Oh shit. Yeah, and that's when the Demon Lord blasts her away without a second thought. End of the story. Or not, considering she has that immortality thing. The parallel minds pick up the narrative, piecing that information together for us before basically just continuing their assault on Mother. It takes the main body a while to recover, but when she does, she basically has a crap time. See, the Demon Lord can't teleport, but she is super fast, so our spider's running around outside avoiding her while popping back into the labyrinth to clear out the remains of Mother's spider army, as well as kill the puppet Terratect. Except, the Demon Lord brought reinforcements in the shape of 10 more puppets. What the actual hell? Half are patrolling the labyrinth looking for her, while the other 5 stick to the Demon Lord. Right, so, new plan? Play hide and seek, where she picks off the puppets using some underhanded tactics, like drowning the bastards for instance. That somehow works, and after finishing off a few more in a different encounter, the Demon Lord basically has the remaining 4 puppets stick to her, while they fruitlessly track down the spider. Alright, how's Mother doing in all this? Not great. Her army's been wiped out, and her stats are about a quarter of what they once were. Great, sounds like she's easy picking then. So with that mindset, our spider teleports into the bottom stratum to finish the job, only to walk right into a trap. Again, Mother's not dumb, and she put down a ton of web that she disguised as the cave surfaces using the highest thread weaving skill, and basically has our heroine right where she wants her. But as the breath attack charges, 2 of the 3 parallel minds return, and hand off the stolen stats from Mother, giving the main body a huge boost in power, as she counters with a breath attack of her own, killing Mother once and for all. Anyway, now that she can freely run from the Demon Lord and is pretty strong herself, our spider ventures out into the human world once more, and immediately finds some bandits trying to rob a carriage. Of all things, I guess. Now, she's not super into the idea of helping humans randomly, but it would kill her buzz if she just let those people die. Plus, humans give a ton more experience than monsters, so why not feed her levels too, right? So she swoops in, kills the bandits, saves a wounded bodyguard, and that's when the lady inside steps out to give her thanks to the randomly, absolutely terrifying legendary class monster that decided to save her on a whim. That's smart. Oh, and she has a kid too? Never mind, she's a fucking genius. And when our spider praises this kid because that's just kind of how she rolls, she sees that she's got two names, Sophia Karen and Shoko Negishi, which does raise the question, why didn't our spider have a Japanese name on her appraisal screen? But answers come in later books, or fucking never if you just watch the anime. After a thought-accelerated monologue about how unfair it is that this girl got reincarnated as a vampire progenitor who can ignore the downsides of being a vampire, and a cool 75,000 skill points to blow when our spider only got a measly 100, she also doesn't recognize this girl's name despite her being pretty infamous in their class. Which is weird, but so much for that. She bails on back to the forest, though her parallel minds do snag the bandits' bodies for a snack later, despite the main body not really feeling like it. Oh well, might as well go with the flow. From there, she sets up shop outside the baby vampire's town and decides to keep an eye on things for now. Like the Demon Lord's just been hanging out in the bottom stratum for a while, but also there's more bandits skulking about trying to steal the baby vampire, so she kills them with a long distance attack she recently unlocked, and decides to throw in a killing spree on a shady organization backing these kidnappers too. Why not? Oh, turns out they're elves. That's very fantasy worldish, right? Except out of fucking nowhere, her parallel minds all jump to the conclusion that since elves are involved, they need to kill them all because fuck elves, I guess. Okay, clearly her parallel minds are starting to act up, and that's kinda freaking her out. Other than that, the people of the town start worshipping our spider after she healed some sick kid on a whim. And now that she's picking up on the language of this world, she's realizing she's been mistaken for the ancient divine beast in the local religion who worships the goddess. Don't tell the Demon Lord that. Anyway, all this healing and good deeds unlocks a slew of new skills, including Charity, her 5th ruler class ability. But on the flip side of that, all this healing and worship has drawn the attention of a rival kingdom who is causing issues for the local lord, Sophia's father. Basically, some diplomat tries to steal the spider with force. Dumb move. So she kills the dude and his goons, which escalates into an all-out war. Sounds like a stupid reason to go to war, but there's clearly some strings being pulled, as the Word of God religion backing the smaller kingdom of Oates who's instigating this, is looking to expand into Sariella, where our spider's at, and her killing that dude was just the excuse to go to war. Oates has a monopoly on this continent's access to the labyrinth, and is also backed by the massive Renzidant Empire. The spider doesn't know all these particulars though, and when the war finally breaks out, she decides to throw her weight behind Sariella on the battlefield, launching a massive magic attack that wipes out a big portion of the enemy soldiers. Cool, and some nice EXP, right? One problem, the Demon Lord shows up right then and there and basically declares that she's going to kill the spider once and for all. Isn't the Demon Lord being a bit more chatty than usual, sounding a lot more like our spider? Yeah, her personality's gone through a bit of a rework at this point. With her boost in stats from Mother though, our spider hangs on enough to survive while wiping out most of the humans involved in this conflict, gaining enough levels to hit her cap before things come grinding to a halt. See, a young boy steps up to stand against the two fighting, but rather than just killing him outright, the Demon Lord actually hesitates. Why is that? Well, he has the hero title, the exact counter to the Demon Lord one. Makes sense, but his stats are also magnitudes weaker than hers at the moment. Couldn't she still kill him? Well, no. The hero title has a specific ability that it can match the Demon Lord's strength. Basically, it doesn't matter how strong the Demon Lord is, the hero can kill them. And while our spider is distracted, the Demon Lord hits her with Abyss Magic, the one method in the system to kill somebody with the immortality skill, because it actually destroys the soul itself. But rather than die, she suddenly breaks out of an egg in the labyrinth once more. No, this isn't a time loop. She actually went back to her old stomping grounds before her fight with the Demon Lord and used the egg-laying skill she got from eating Mother's soul. Since she was able to use kin control to attack Mother, she thought maybe she could just send her soul out of her body into one of her offspring using the same method. And hey, turns out it worked. Yeah, now she's got a pretty durable form of immortality. Only issue is, while her max stats are the same, this newborn body is so incredibly weak, she can't use magic or anything. Yeah, she might actually starve to death here, but that's when the man in black armor shows up again. Now finally learning his name here, Guli Distro Diaz, or Gilly for short, because that's a hell of a lot easier to say. There's a small lore dump where he says a few things here. He sent Ariel the Demon Lord to go attack the spider as a favor, but that's the extent of his meddling, and he won't do it again. He also feels bad for the reincarnations for getting wrapped up in this world's problems, and thus he hands the spider a freshly slain Earth Dragon who likely would have wanted to be consumed by her due to their species' warped sense of honor. But before he goes, He asks her if she finds what he's doing pointless, as he's actually interested to hear the opinions of an outsider. But she just responds he should do what he thinks is best. And that's basically that. He leaves, she eats, and evolves into her ultimate form, an arachne. After making her human half look decent with a bra at least, she realizes her face looks the same as it did back in Japan, and then she makes a quick check-in on the baby vampire to see that all hell is breaking loose. Elves have broken into the manor, while the city is being ransacked by oats. So our spider teleports in just in time to land a heavy punch on the elf head honcho's face. This is Potamus, and I'm introducing him out of order, but he's a bastard. That's all you really need to know. Fuck this dude. Our spider is rocking stats in the 40,000 range at this point, so the fact that Potamus stands back up after that is pretty damn scary. Also, Sophia turned the family servant who was carrying her out as her father's dying wish into a vampire, because he was on death's door too. Also, this is the same bodyguard she saved in that carriage incident. Small world. Yeah, definitely a close call when our spider showed up. Sophia and Mara were about to die. Anyway, Potamus activates an anti-technique barrier that basically cuts off those inside from the system, or somewhat at least. Skills that work inside the body are still active, but stats and skills outside the body don't, like defense for instance. And after Potamus gets punched, revealing under his skin is actually a cyborg body looking a lot like the Terminator, he says he's sick of what he assumes is Ariel's new trump card interfering so much. He turns his arm into a goddamn gun, where we're really slapped in the face that this isn't so much a fantasy setting, but a post-apocalyptic sci-fi one. It's a close call again, but our spider realizes that her gravity-based evil eye skill works. She actually damages Potamus's gun. So yeah, they're in another stalemate. And that's when Ariel shows up between them with a goofy intro that sounds a lot like our spider's inner monologue, before snapping at Potamus to spit out what the hell he's doing there. He refuses, of course, and tries to attack Ariel, but she kills him without issue, even inside that barrier. Yeah, only his head is left, but he claps back that he'll kill her one day, referring to her as a little girl before she squashes his head. With that, she turns to our spider and says in a light, but a hint of actual seriousness, that she's honestly scared of her. Yeah, the Demon Lord is actually scared of our spider. Why? Well, because she's alive after being hit with abyss magic, and the Demon Lord doesn't really know how she can actually kill her. On top of that, her former body brain has mixed with Ariel's soul to the point that it's altered her personality, and she honestly doesn't even want to kill her anymore, even after she's done so much damage to Ariel's forces. So with that, she extends her hand for a truce, and that's basically all our spider ever wanted in the first place. From there, the Demon Lord speaks to Sophia despite her being a baby, where she says she knows about the reincarnations now that she's got the spider's memories knocking about in her head, and asks her and her newly transformed, ultra-dependable knight in shining armor, Marizafis, to come along, explaining the whole situation from there. See, she's the leader of the demons and all, meaning them as vampires would likely better survive in her country than human territory. But they do want some time to think it over. It is a pretty big decision. A lot has definitely happened, and thus, our group begins traveling together. Oh, you thought we were done? No, I just covered the spider side of this story. This is a complex and split narrative told out of order through multiple points of view. We're missing the entire reincarnations plotlines, the heroes, and other side characters who either foreshadow events or get reframed many books down the line. So let's restart, shall we? We pick up with Shunsuke, a boy going about his day in class when the incident occurs that kills him and his fellow students. We're introduced to his best friends, Kanata and Kyoya, as well as a few other students that come up. Hasabe, a pretty generic girl who just sits next to him. Shinohara, the stereotypical popular girl. Natsume, the pretty obnoxious jock. The real horror girl, or Rihoko as they call her in the book's translation. Hate to say it, I kinda prefer the anime's translation of Spooky. Her real name is Negishi, which we just got introduced to her in the last section. Oh yeah, and there's Oka, their teacher. That's when the explosion happens, and Shun wakes up as a baby, the fourth prince of the Analeic Kingdom specifically. He's got a whopping 100,000 skill points, the unique Divine Protection skill, and actually does struggle quite a bit in his new life. I mean, the series does try and tackle the mental stress of having some 16 years of experience in an infant's body, but what does keep him sane in this world is the voice of God is speaking to him in Japanese, and also the fact he needs to be a proper role model for his kid sister. Well, I say kid, but she's honestly barely younger than him. Also, too bad she's super attached. Like, scarily so. Fast forward to his big debut age, where there's an appraisal ceremony. This is where a skill level 10 magic tool does the appraising, because the appraisal skill is such a bitch to level and causes headaches. However, the stone is rare, and a level 10 one is essentially a national treasure. So Shun goes up to his father, the king obviously, gets appraised, and stuns the crowd with his high stats and massive amount of skills. And also his skill points too. Yeah, he's done good, as all those things basically secure he's going to be an asset to the kingdom and he won't be discarded. Well, as far as they're concerned. So as he greets people at his debut, he hears a curious rumor about a duke's daughter who happened to have similar appraisal results to his a few weeks ago. So going out on a limb when she greets him for the first time formally, he throws in a Japanese greeting where the girl visibly responds. That's when Shun asks his father if he can speak to her alone for a moment, which is surely improper, but sure, they let it go. Inside a meeting room where they speak Japanese, they quickly find out this girl is actually Shun's best friend Kanata from his same class. It's funny that he was reincarnated as a girl, but at the same time, they both tear up at validation of their circumstances and having someone to actually relate to. That's short-lived though, because Sue kicks down the door looking like a straight-up yandere about to kill Kanata all over again. Fast forward a bit more where two gifts are presented to the royal family, an earth dragon egg and some terratect silk that was woven into a scarf by Shlane's late mother for his older brother, who just so happens to be the current hero. These two treasures were taken from our spider's first nest. And as it turns out, the egg is about to hatch at long last. When it breaks free, it doesn't look much like a dragon, more like a big-ass lizard, where Sue even comments about how not cute it is. That seems to hurt the dragon's feelings weirdly enough. This thing can't understand them, can it? Their half-elf maid Anna picks up the dragon and checks its sex real quick, confirming it is in fact female, leaving the poor baby dragon feeling violated. So at that, Shun decides to raise the dragon, since Sue showed no interest, and names it Faye. Katia, Kanada's nickname in this world, comes over with an encyclopedia of skills to look through, where they notice something pretty major, something most natives to this world probably didn't. Every skill is linked to combat in some way. They're only able to pick up on that because they lived in Japan where skills didn't exist, but that contrast allows them to see how battle-focused skills and stats are, which gives a dark twist to this world that it's subtly pushing its inhabitants towards combat. And with the Demon Lord being more active again, there's a chance they'll get called into combat one day too. On another day, when Shun's alone with Faye, he hums a song from his old life. And that's when he hears a voice in his head that's not the word of God speaking to him in Japanese. Yeah, pretty clear based on how perceptive and human-like Faye is, but she's also a reincarnation. That one popular girl Shinohara from his old life. She's still a bit of a tease, but this whole reincarnating into an ugly monster thing has definitely impacted her attitude a lot. She's mellowed out and become more humble. Yeah, she was actually conscious in that egg for a while, so she had time to think about how shitty she was to her former classmate Wakaba, the prettiest girl in their class that she also bullied. So with the expectation that they're all going to be called to war one day, they start training in earnest. All of them, including Sue and Faye, because you can still train your stats and skills without leveling up. So that's exactly what they do. Turns out Shun hasn't even touched his skill points, but Katia has burned through quite a few herself, namely to grab appraisal. Despite her knowing how garbage it is at lower levels, she must not have had a good affinity for the skill either, as it costs her 1,000 skill points where for Shun, it only costs 100. And with that little bit of temptation, he snags it for himself. During one such training session though, Shun's older brother, the hero, Julius, shows up for some sparring. He's just the best big bro and really wants to be a good example for Shun. But also, since he's the hero, he has to maintain that facade of strength. Despite his stats, he still has to put up some effort against Shun, where he honestly thinks he might lose to the kid someday soon, which is pretty impressive. But this does solidify one thing for us, that Shun is a big fan of his awesome big brother and aspires to help him in battle one day. And not too long after that, Shun, Katia, and Faye specifically are all summoned to meet some special guests. There's some foreshadowing about Shun's future love interest with Katia, but we're actually introduced to Potamus here, fuck that guy, and his daughter Philomos as ambassadors. Shun doesn't like Potamus off the bat, because despite his friendly words, the dude's personality is dry and he gives off bad vibes. But he leaves his daughter with them after confirming they have what she needs, and he also calls her Oka. Yeah, she's their teacher, big shocker. She tells them that she's been trying to gather up all the reincarnations to keep them safe in the elf village, but they can talk about that a lot more when they enroll in school shortly. Basically, it's a noble school for rich people from every country, and it just so happens to be in this kingdom. That's convenient. After the opening ceremony at the academy, Oka takes Shun, Katia, and Faye to introduce them to two other reincarnations attending. Yuri, who was Shun's desk neighbor in class and now a future saint candidate, but also Hugo, or Natsume, the jock leader of the boys in class and now crowned prince of the Renzidant Empire. And with that, the main reincarnations for Shun's group have gathered. As a backdrop to this section, Julius and his party are entering the Elroy Labyrinth to subjugate a rare Terratech species called a Nightmare's Vestige. Now, this is played up to sound like it's our spider due to how the story plays out, but really it's to create some dramatic tension while introducing us to him and his friends. I'm kinda glossing over it because it doesn't really matter much in the anime, and his entire party gets much more character development later on in the story. So let's go ahead and skip ahead to magic lessons, where Shun gives us a breakdown before our spider got the ability to use magic on just how it all works. You need 3 skills to use magic in this world: magic power perception, magic power operation, and a magic skill to actually use. Perception senses magic power, operation controls it, and then the magic skill itself is basically the blueprints for it. That's gonna be kinda hard to get without skill points, right? Well, humans have magic tools that let them use magic without skills. And if you use those enough, you can actually gain skill proficiency and pick it up naturally. So, Shun and his class are doing just that with water wands. When Hugo decides to be a show-off and blow up all the targets with fire magic, Shun sees the danger in that and blasts out a level 1 water spell at the targets and puts them out, which is pretty impressive, considering he cancelled out Hugo's level 5 fire spell with it. Everyone pats him on the back while Hugo fumes, and that basically sets his horrible grudge in motion. Throughout this point too, Katia gets chapters talking to other characters where we see that her mind is fully shifted to that of a woman's. She's not attracted to women, which the other reincarnations were kinda treating her weird for a bit, and everyone else seems to pick up on the signs that she has a crush on Shun, though she's in denial about it. Also, Faye had to go level up with Anna, or else she would die. Yeah, the first species for an earthworm has a pretty short lifespan, so she needed to evolve to prolong it. As for Shun, his life's going fine. He's popular with people because he's nice and talented, but Yuri's gotten way too into this word of God religion and tries to convert him at every turn. Oka's being mysterious as hell, like she rarely shows up to class for days on end. Yeah, all the people Shun thought he knew are slowly changing, so he asks Katia not to change. Too bad she already is. During a little survival trip out into the woods as a class trip, Hugo pulls a pretty disturbing stunt to try and kill Shun as revenge for embarrassing him earlier. Dude thinks he's the protagonist of this story, but he's mistaken. And the issue is, he has Shun severely outclassed in terms of power, because Hugo actually spent most of his skill points and trained. Also, dude is leveled up too. But just as Shun's about to get killed, Oka puts an end to it by saying she's already thwarted Hugo's plans, and then does some crazy ass shit. She activates a ruler's authority, which puts Hugo into a compliant state, where she then strips him of his skills and stats. He's pissed when Shun confirms that he's weak as hell now, and basically they just arrest him. But little did they know, an earth dragon actually followed them back to school. As soon as they arrive, Oka's nowhere to be seen when the dragon launches its attack. It was summoned under contract by one of Hugo's goons, but they lost control of it, and now it's running wild. It's got stats around 2000 and takes all the reincarnations, plus Sue just to hold it down. Their magic isn't very effective because, well, dragon. And that's when the worm uses a breath attack, and Shun buys light attack to deflect it. But it's not working that well. Luckily, Faye steps up and bites the worm in the neck, which allows Shun to get the killing blow. Awesome. Except one problem. Now she has the Kin Eater title, where the two of them are pretty confident this was one of Faye's parents. Did it come looking for her? Who knows? But it makes things get a bit more real for them, as Shun's now dealing with some PTSD after facing his first real fight, and not liking the feeling. It's also around this time we start having some minor scenes with the Demon Lord before she's introduced to our spider, and this is actually meant to set up some clever misleads. We never got a real description of our spider, and she also unlocked the leveled version of the Demon Lord's skill in the middle stratum, which is, to be clear, different than the Demon Lord title. So flashing forward to this and the similar speech patterns is meant to make audiences think the spider becomes the Demon Lord until Volume 4. And shortly after that introduction, Shun gets a notification from the Word of God that he's gained the hero title, meaning Julius died in the first major battle with the demon army. Back at home, he's rushed to his father's office where they confirm that he has the title. Both Shun and his father share a moment crying over Julius's death. But this isn't really the time for grieving, as the eldest prince pushes them along, where they make a plan not to announce Shun's ascent to hero to the public just yet. I mean, no one really knows that Julius has died, and the prince being the hero was already an issue politically. So the very next hero coming from the same royal family would surely cause even more problems, at least as far as they know. That's when a general comes in and updates the king on what happened during the first confrontation. The Demon Lord's army struck multiple forts and basically smashed through most of them, aside from one, protected by the strongest human mage, Renant. So not great news, but for now, they tell Shun to rest and prepare to announce himself as the next hero. In the meantime, Oka talks to the third prince about Shun becoming a hero and suspicious activity in the castle. Thus he's informing her in case they need the elves to shelter Shun, since he doesn't want to lose another brother after Julius. While training, because he can't calm down, Shun talks to Kadia through a skill called Fartalk, which is the evolved form of telepathy, and he gets an update on the academy. Sue's been acting distant, but Shun just writes that off as her growing up. It seems like pretty much everyone is delaying the news of Julius's death. Kadia tells Shun to keep a low profile, but he doesn't really see the big deal. He's just shut in at the castle until he's announced as the hero. So I guess he'll just do his best, right? Yeah, here's our hint that Kadia can put 2 and 2 together better than Shun, as he's apparently pretty damn dense. He's also formed a true contract with Faye as a familiar, so she can come help him whenever he's in trouble. But upon doing so, she suddenly turned back into an egg and has been dormant ever since. Later, Hiron shows up at the castle, having survived the battle in which Julius died. He's part of the hero party and Julius's childhood friend. The very first thing he does is apologize, saying he should have died instead. Yeah, apparently Julius gave him a magic item that revives the user when they die. So, he's carrying a ton of guilt. He relays what happened, where the demon army summoned a Queen Terratech to tear through the fort, but they couldn't control it obviously, and it ended up wiping out both armies. Julius stepped up to fend it off, actually killing the damn thing. But that's when a girl who was all white appeared out of nowhere and killed everyone without any effort using a rod attack. Irons gives him Julius's precious scarf as a memento, and Shun's struggling to meet the world's expectations. However, with Irons there, he offers to be his shield too, since he couldn't protect Julius, and Shun accepts. When Sue gets back, both she and Shun go to their father's office for a summons, but the king's confused. He didn't actually call for him. What the hell's going on? Well, that's when things go silent, and Sue just straight up kills their father. She then screams, asking Shun what he's done, and that's when a bunch of guards and the first prince storm in immediately, and pin the assassination on him. Bro, what? Yeah, this is clearly a plot, and that's when one of the guards clashes with Shun and slices his sword clear in half. Whoa, who the hell's that strong? Hugo, apparently, who's been named the new hero despite not having the title. Yeah, he's back, having slipped away when people weren't watching him. Or not, because he brainwashed them using his new lust skill. Same with Sue, which is ostensibly why she killed her father. Shun's about to get his ass killed because his eldest brother sold out the kingdom to Hugo to avoid Shun being named king over him, in hopes to prevent him from having to go to the front lines in this war. But when he charges at Hugo out of rage for what he's done, Sophia swoops in, kicks him, blocks any appraisal attempt on her with her ruler's authority, and then flips the bird as Shun tries to hit her with magic. Things don't look so good, except that's when Hoka swoops in, blows Hugo away with wind magic, and grabs Shun to run as soon as she sees Sophia. Out in the hall, we see that all hell is broken loose. The third prince's forces are fighting with the first, and this is also Shun can escape. They run into Anna on the way out, but Shun immediately sees that she's brainwashed, so they knock her out and take her with them. While fleeing the castle though, Caddy is blocking their escape and turns out to also be brainwashed. That's going to be a running theme. We switch over to Kadia's point of view for this fight, where we get an inner monologue about her watching her own body move. He's stronger than her, and it's at this point where she finally accepts this situation for what it is. She decides the one fighting Shun is her male self, and the one resisting inside is her female self. Basically, this is a metaphor for her accepting herself as a woman, and when she's about to fire a deadly spell at Shun, she breaks the mind control enough to self-sabotage the spell, and it backfires in her face, causing serious harm. But rather than die like she was actually about to, Shun saves her life with his latest pickup, the Mercy skill. Yeah, this is another cheat ability that allows you to revive those who have recently died within the system as long as their bodies are still intact. And to carry this metaphor further, this is Kadia finally accepting her feelings for Shun after he saved her life. But that doesn't mean they're out of the woods just yet. Sophia and some ninja-looking dudes show up to absolutely wreck the fling reincarnations, even tossing Potamus's severed head to stoke the fire with Oka. They're all strong as hell, but right when Sophia has them cornered, even putting Oka into a coma, Faye shows up as a freshly hatched lightworm who can now fly. Neat. So she has them hop on her back, and they fly away because she recognizes she's still no match for Sophia. That's an understatement. A few days later, they hear that the third prince and Kadia's parents are about to be executed for leading the revolt. And against better judgment, Shun and everyone charge in to save the day. They think they're hot shit for all of 2 seconds, when they're suddenly getting sniped by low-level spells from super far away by a single old man caster atop the castle. Their magic can't even reach, on top of him shredding their shields with basic skills. Another dude who's super strong suddenly appeared, so their ego's in tatters. But as they push in, getting closer, Shun drops in and the mage basically pieces out after playing around for a bit. That was weird, but he was actually just throwing some quick training at the new hero out of obligation to his old student. Yeah, that was Renant. This is where we get a flashback to him meeting the Nightmare of the Labyrinth during their expedition, where he becomes obsessed with it as the pinnacle of strength, at least as far as magic's concerned. Oh, and boy Remus was disgraced for taking the fall for that expedition's failure. That's like not even important in the anime, but it is in the light novels. So they race through the empty castle, find the prisoners right as they're beheaded, so Shun saves them once again with mercy, and the first prince is in a stupor repeating how he's the king. Seems like Hugo's brainwashing did a number on him. Other than that, the castle's basically empty, so they bail with the intention of waiting for Oka to wake up from her coma to decide on a plan of action. It's around that time they cleanse Anna of her brainwashing too, and she's incredibly traumatized for putting Shun through all that. She owes his family a lot, and the fact that she betrayed him weighs pretty heavy on her conscience, even if it was brainwashing. With Oka finally awake days later though, they can plan their course of action. Hugo's leading an attack on the elf village with his army, and that won't do. They obviously have unfinished business with him, and as far as Shun knows, the elves are good people, so they decide to try and beat the Renzadon Empire there. There's an argument about who all's going, but fucking skip it. It's not important. The only one who matters, who isn't obvious, is Anna, because she's a half-elf, and the elves are basically elf supremacists and hate half-breeds. So, how do they get into the elf village? The magic tool teleporters that people use to get around the world quickly are controlled by literal governments. So, they can't use that with their current status as fugitives, which means they have to go through the labyrinth. They get a guide after some struggle, ending up with the father of Hyrance's acquaintance, who played a minor role in identifying our spider as the Nightmare of the Labyrinth. Also, Faye can transform into a human now. Cool. In the labyrinth, Anna struggles to keep sane due to the mental stress and feeling like dead weight. Shun picks up some valuable life lessons from the old man and Oka. They kill a freshly evolved earth dragon, and bump into a swarm of nightmare vestiges who use telepathy to speak. They rightly point out they have reincarnations with them, that they have rulers among them too, and foreshadow the end of the world before piecing out. Cool stuff. With that, they get out of the labyrinth and make their way to a teleporter to the elf village. It's here that Oka drops some deep lore for her fellow reincarnations, as well as their party members who are from that world. That she, Shun, Kadia, and Faye are all reincarnations from another world without skills, how that shit doesn't make sense to an outsider, and that the elves believe that administrators are siphoning skills and stats gained by people to boost their power. So the elves oppose people getting stronger because they want to overthrow the administrators. Yeah, basically throwing a decent chunk of the taboo knowledge on people without warning. But she theorizes that the previous hero and demon lord were actually working with the elves to attack the administrators, but their plan failed and now the current demon lord is working alongside them. This is her framing her rescuing the reincarnations as preventing the administrators from gaining powerful assets. She is partly lying, but we'll get into that later. In the meantime, Hugo's being used and isn't actually their main enemy. Sophia's another reincarnation, and she's just one of the reincarnations siding with the administrators. So after Oka leaves, Shun talks to Kadia and Faye where they basically say they don't think Oka is telling the whole truth, and not to believe her wholeheartedly. Kadia doesn't trust her a ton and basically advises Shun to do the same. Later they teleport into the elf village where they try to kick them out, but who says they can stay? None other than Potamus, who's supposed to be dead. He brushes off their shock, saying it'll take more than just a beheading to kill him. He takes them to a room with a meal prepared, where they ask for information about the army marching. Potamus gives them the barest of details, and seems entirely uninterested though. It's about 3 days out, with a massive joint army between the Empire and Word of God religion, and it seems like the strongest monsters in the area are seemingly moving out of their way. Yeah, the Queen Terratech that calls that forest home has moved, causing most of the monsters to flee. What awful timing, wink wink. The elves are safe though, considering they have a massive barrier that can't be broken protecting the whole village, which is absolutely massive by the way. So with that, Potamus leaves them to their own devices, saying they can visit the other reincarnations tomorrow. The next day, Oka takes them, and no kidding, it is a bit of a walk. While they're going, they talk about the ancient barrier, how it's strong enough to repel an attack from a Queen Terratect, and it's also been around for fucking ages. How long? Who knows? But does Hugo have a way around it? Oka says she doesn't know exactly how it works, but she doesn't discount that Hugo could probably find a way around it if he wants. However, she's also not saying definitively, which only raises Kadia's suspicion more. When they arrive at the reincarnation settlement, they find that Oka gets a cold reception from the others, while the hero party is accepted pretty readily. They want to catch up with their old classmates, obviously, and it's here we learn exactly what Oka did to rescue those reincarnations. It's already been hinted at that she's done some not-so-savory things, but it amounts to kidnapping and human trafficking. Well, that she knows of. Oh hey, the same industry our spider saw the elves engaging in. Big shocker. So, as it turns out, Oka pretty much ruined these kids' lives and didn't tell them why, which is why they hate her. We get introduced to Tagawa and Kushitani, two adventurers who have made a name for themselves with stats roughly on par with Shun's. They're recent arrivals to the village too, but since they can fight, they decide to join the fight against Hugo to protect the other reincarnations. But as this happy reunion between old classmates plays out, Shun is struck with a pretty scary realization that's finally sinking in. His close friend from his past life, Kyoya, is absent, and Oka's phrasing said Negishi was one of the reincarnations that sided with the administrators, meaning it's likely he's their enemy too. Not that he wants to accept that. We cut to the Demon Lord traveling to the elf village to kick Potamus's ass, with the white girl who killed Julius, an actual administrator aptly named White. At this point, we know the Demon Lord isn't our spider, but the evidence is mounting as to who White actually is, and again, the anime kinda ruins it. Anyway, we cut over to Potamus getting a report that another army is approaching behind the Empires, and he's already aware. He knows the Empire is just a diversion, and the Demon Lord is coming herself. He suspects a certain old schemer is behind this. But all he tells the elf reporting to do is prepare the Glorious. How many? All of them, because he expects this to be a huge fight, and he's finally gonna put the little girl Demon Lord in her place. Or so he thinks. Skip ahead to Shun and company investigating the barrier. It's solid, but they're trying their best to get in their enemies' heads on how they're gonna get past it. And ultimately, this conversation doesn't even matter, because word comes in that the teleporters are being attacked. And they go in to find another reincarnation they recognize as the class Gopher. Dude's got the unique ninja skill that allows him to use clones to dodge attacks, which is, let's face it, fucking annoying. But once they figure out his trick, they kind of have him beat. Too bad he's not really there for a fight though, and he whips out a magic sword and throws it. A quick appraisal reveals it's an exploding sword, and that's when they all make a run for it. The teleporter blows up and they assume that was a trap to get them stuck in the barrier, but that's dumb. The elf village is self-sustaining. They're not gonna starve in there. Pretty much everyone knows that. That's when the barrier falls, and suddenly everything makes sense. It was actually to prevent the elves from escaping. Oka sees this and quickly rallies the elves to fight against the invading army before heading out to the front lines herself. But in the midst of that, she has a flashback to her first gaining consciousness in this world as a baby. She has the unique student roster skill that allows her to see the status of all the students in her class, including when they die. Many didn't live past 20 years, and due to her actions, some of their fates have changed to dying in the battle for the Elf Forest, though turns out most are still dying this year, with divested of skills as the cause. That right there is basically what made her believe the elf's story about administrators stealing skills and stuff, which is why she's working so hard to save her students, because that was the one thing she latched onto in this new world, was being their teacher. But as she questions if she's been doing the right thing all this time, she bumps into Hugo for their fateful battle. Dude just straight up stomps her, despite the fact he shouldn't be that strong. Remember, she kinda stripped him of his stats and skills. So, how is he this strong? Simple. He acquired the greed skill on top of lust. Greed allows him to steal some of the stats, skills, and skill points of those he's killed, on top of him gaining a ton of titles, with gear made from monster parts to boost his power. And since he's pretty damn strong with this haphazard build, he's getting cocky enough to tell Sophia not to interfere with this battle. Oh, Yuri's there too, blasting away with magic, spewing some racist shit about elves because she's completely bought into the Word of God's propaganda. Also, she was named Hugo Saint. Sure. But then Oka snipes her, taking her down, and then tricks Hugo by creating a barrier that removes air from inside to suffocate him, which almost works, until Sophia steps up, destroys it, and saves his ass yet again. So Hugo lunges, damn near cuts Oka's arm off, but Shun comes in to save the day in the nick of time. Okay, Their fight's pretty straightforward. Now that he has the hero title and has actually leveled up and gained some battle experience, he straight up dog walks Hugo, who's still on that whole "this world belongs to me" shtick, which makes Shun give a hero-inspired speech about it not belonging to anyone, where Sophia can't help but laugh. Dude's ignorant, and he doesn't even understand how ridiculous he sounds. At this point, she informs Hugo he's outlived his usefulness, and asks for an update from Merizafis, who springs up from her shadow. Getting a reaction from Tagawa and Kushitani, turns out he's one of the commanders of the Demon Lord army, which means that's who Sophia is with. A little late to realize that now, but the invasion's already begun, and that means Sophia has to keep the hero busy. She whips out a massive broadsword and absolutely trashes them, like using no effort at all. Since she can nullify magic, has awesome strength and durability, they can't even do any damage. Even when they realize a trick to make some magic land, she just laughs it off because her stats let her compensate, and then she proceeds to keep kicking their asses. At that point, Faye steps in her lightworm form and tries to surrender instead of fighting. Yeah, now Shun finally gets it, why Faye hasn't fought Sophia yet, despite being the strongest member of their party. It's because she knew they didn't stand a chance in the first place. But even after all that, Shun still won't back down, even knowing he can't win. Kushitani and Tagawa come back after beating Merizafis' clone, which was weaker than his main body apparently, and that gives them hope that they might actually stand a chance. Spoiler, they don't, because that's when another person shows up, dropping those two to the ground easily, and the big surprise that everybody already suspected, Kyoya is with the demon army too. Yeah, he looks like his old self, meaning he's a monster transformed to look like a human, but he's taller and jacked as shit. Shun is stunned that he's working with the administrators, but honestly, Kyoya doesn't see how Shun can side with the elves. They're evil as shit, bro. That's when Oka speaks up, saying he's not innocent either, as he's one of the commanders of the demon army too, named Wrath. I'll give you one guess as to what his ruler skill is. Yeah, the elves then show up, bringing some literal mecha tanks into the fight, and telling the hero to head back to the village to go fight the Demon Lord. But Wrath and Sophia stop them and fight off the Glorious. And if you've happened to have read a little further into the books, you'd understand just how impressive that actually is. Wrath fires off some more exploding swords that he made at the elves, and Shun jumps in to stop him, only to get pushed around because Wrath is that much better with a sword. Also, he has higher stats. So he goes to cut Shun's sword in two, but that's when Anna jumps in to protect him, getting cut so badly that she's pretty much dead. So Shun's obviously going to refuse that. He activates Mercy and maxes out his taboo skill right there, getting the forbidden knowledge installed into his brain. That's when Hugo regains consciousness and tries to jump at Sophia in revenge, but she's not going to be caught off guard. She grabs him and he calls her by her old nickname, which pisses her off. She's like half a second away from killing him when White shows up, collects a small spider from Hugo's ear, making him collapse. This is when Sophia reveals that this is the person she'd been calling Master all along. White then bows to Oka and says it's been a long time, and calls her teacher. The big bombshell reveal ends with White being Wakaba all along, who's supposed to be dead. Put an asterisk on it. Just wait a few more books, it gets complicated. So what I just described is what happened in the books, and some things are different or non-existent in the anime, and those changes impact the story quite a bit, by either stripping its depth or adding needless complications to an already complicated timeline. The anime glosses over one of Kumiko's major traumas in the series, and that being her fall into the lower stratum for the first time. And that's just kinda summarized in the anime to Araba killing a snake and her being scared. But it's a fight for life and death in the books and manga. She damn near got killed by a bee on the way down, gets interrupted by a swarm of monsters for Araba to break it up easily, spends multiple days clinging to life as she builds a nest to climb back up, while baiting out bees in a desperate attempt to level up and survive, only for Araba to show back up and blast her home and bees into oblivion. That basically ends her first near-death experience in the labyrinth. It's a fucking miracle she survived. And that's what spurs her to look for another exit while honing her stealth, throw, hit, health regeneration, and fear-resistant skills in the process. It's way more impactful by giving us Kumiko's mental state and showing us her fight for survival firsthand than the, whoa, big scary dragon, better activate stealth that the anime gave us. In fact, early on in the anime, Kumiko was implied to either be buying skills or just have zero explanation on how she acquired them. Next thing you know, text is on screen showing us she's using a skill that we've never seen or heard of before. The issue is, some of these skills are pretty important to her development and combat style. In that scene with Araba that I just mentioned, she just activates stealth, implying she either bought it or had it the whole time. But no, she obtained it naturally by getting the assassin title in the upper stratum. But it's only when she's nearly killed by Araba that the skill starts going up a ton, because she has to hide under the rubble of her destroyed home, praying that Araba doesn't find her. That's when she realizes the power of stealth, and uses it to constantly avoid death, or coax out her assassin playstyle. Again, compared to how the anime is like, here's a skill she's using now, it makes a big difference. All of the reincarnation stories are compressed and shuffled around a ton in the anime. Shlain is first introduced as a kid and meets Katia at his appraisal ceremony, and after his only moment of putting 2 and 2 together in the entire series, he speaks to Katia in Japanese for a moment during their greetings. So that's how they connected in this world. They grew up together and trained. You compare that to the anime, they just kinda knew each other off the bat. And same with Oka. Definitely lacks impact. Sue's yandere tendencies are incredibly overt from her introduction as well, to the point that Katia is actually scared of her, and that's actually toned down in the anime so that Sue just kinda seems to maybe have a bit of a brother complex. I mean, she does, but definitely nowhere near as played up. Also, weird this needs to be said, but Faye doesn't actually talk in the books. She uses her telepathy skill exclusively until she gets her human form, which also takes ages for her to even communicate with Shun in the first place. Reason being, she didn't know he was a reincarnation until he hums a Japanese song to himself, and that's what actually pushes her to speak up. Oka and Potamus are introduced before the academy, where Potamus isn't introduced in the anime until Shun's the hero. Also, that really throws off the timeline. Was the dude just chilling in the castle that whole time? That kinda brings in the question for like, how long was Shun the hero in the anime? We don't know, because Potamus is introduced, and then like the next episode, his head's being thrown at Oka's feet. It's not until the actual entrance ceremony to the academy where Hyugo and Yuri are introduced. We're also made acutely aware here how strange their group appears to those around them. This is supposed to be their first meeting, and they all seem buddy-buddy. But probably some of the biggest changes are Katia's entire arc. Book 2 spends a decent amount of time showing how she's definitely not a dude in a girl's body. Like, she's not attracted to girls anymore, and every other girl she talks to picks up on her crush for Shun. That's set up for her coming to terms with her feelings and ultimate sacrifice when she's brainwashed by Hyugo. She frames her dying there and being resurrected by Shun as Kanata being the one who's dying, essentially saying she's accepted herself as a woman and ready to pursue Shun romantically despite the dude being dense as hell. It's a big pivotal character moment for her, and the anime just kinda like glosses over it. I mean, she gets jealous after that, but it's never really explained or brought up. It undercuts most of the tension between them after that point, where Kanata just acts jealous that Shun is getting close to other women. That actually has build up in the book, so it makes sense and doesn't feel out of left field. While Mother sending an arch and 3 greater terror texts does happen in the anime, it happens before Kumako's fight with Araba in the books, and only happened in the first place because her parallel minds attack on Mother. At first glance, that just kinda seems like a minor shuffling of events, but it changes the entire motivation behind the attack. The anime frames it as she escaped the labyrinth and ignored Mother's order to return as the cause, but that small change impacts a few plot points that undercuts the dangerous game that Kumiko is playing by picking a fight with Mother. The books show that Mother tries to exert her control on her offspring once they hit a certain level of strength. Basically, she doesn't bother with the smaller, lesser terror texts because there's a shit ton of them in their fodder. And Kumiko noticed this control after her encounter with the fire dragon in the middle stratum. That encounter happens in the books when Mother is heading from the upper stratum after laying her eggs to the lower stratum, and the fire dragon tries to attack her, where she just blows it away with a breath attack. Kumiko actually sees that go down and is fucking terrified, cementing just how strong Mother is, that she's the apex of the entire labyrinth. But ultimately, she does try to cross the battlefield after Mother leaves, only to get attacked by that surviving dragon. Now that is a tough fight, and one that lacks pretty much all context in the anime. Well, besides, here's a half-dead dragon jump scare from the lava. But she notices afterwards that she was irritated at the dragon for being in her way. That's what made her realize Mother was trying to control her mind. It's at that point when she sends her parallel minds to go strike back. Why this matters though? It shows she wasn't using her parallel minds when she was ambushed by the spider army, or even in her fight with Araba. This is meant to show us how far she's come in managing her skills and power, that she actually doesn't need the crutch of the parallel minds to do some damage. But the anime really undercuts that for no fucking reason. There's zero benefit from reordering those events. I mean, they still cover them, so it's not like they were cut for time, but it does reduce a lot of the narrative tension in the story. In fact, the events after Kumiko leaves the labyrinth are shuffled around a ton in the anime. having Kumiko juggle the plot lines between volumes 4 and 5 at the same time. In the books, she has her hands, or rather, scythes full I guess, dealing with Mother and the Demon Lord from the moment she leaves the labyrinth, and she actually kills Mother before finding Sophia as a baby, meaning she's a monster on par with a Queen Terratect at that point in the story, which explains why her dad was freaking the fuck out about the infamous Nightmare of the Labyrinth setting up shop outside his town. And due to the fact that a lot of the personality from the Word of God and Goddess religions are stripped from the anime, it means most of the complexities of the politics are gone in this section. Hell, I didn't even cover it in my recap, because it's more foreshadowing for later volumes, but Dustin, the pontiff for the Word of God religion, has been orchestrating events against Sariella to take over it for his church in an effort to unite humanity. He's aware of Potamus's activities, and susses out that he's been running a human trafficking operation to target specific children, but he doesn't quite know what makes them special just yet, because the dude's a political powerhouse and actually complex character. The anime just makes Dustin look like some dude who's kinda smart, when he's literally one of the 4 big players behind the scenes in this world. The average person in this setting assumes the core conflict is between humans and demons, but due to Dustin's limited screen time, Ariel's viewpoints being trimmed for time, Potamus's point of views being stripped out entirely, you really miss a lot of who the core players are. And that right there is going to impact future adaptation plans for this franchise. It would probably take episodes of backfilling to cover who Dustin is, what Potamus is up to, and how the reincarnations are just pawns in their schemes. The mystery of who the Demon Lord actually is isn't nearly as played up in the anime, and practically spoiled by the simple fact that it's a visual medium. The issue being, we know Kumiko is white, and I don't mean the character, but also the character. Her coloring from the moment of her birth is straight up white in the anime, but that's not necessarily the case in the light novels, or even the manga honestly. While she doesn't have a mirror, and strangely enough it is canonical, monsters don't need water to survive, anytime she talks about her appearance of what she can see for herself, it's black. Her siblings are black, and she sees that her legs are black, so that immediately gives the distinction between her and white, while the Demon Lord on the other hand is given a dark color scheme. On top of that, the Demon Lord doesn't appear in the novels until after Kumiko gets the Demon Lord skill, where the Demon Lord starts talking about reincarnations, seems familiar with Yamada, and tries to set up the idea that Kumiko becomes the Demon Lord for a few books, until it's revealed that she's not the Demon Lord. Well, I guess kinda. Depends how you interpret the merger between the Demon Lord and Body Brain, I guess. It's not until she evolves into an Arachne at the end of book 5 that we actually know she's white, the character. It sets up some intrigue for later events in the story, with a neat subversion of audience expectations that the anime just can't match, for the simple fact that the voice actors are pretty damn distinct, and Kumiko's color scheme is plainly related to whites, thus ruining one of the more fun reveals in the series. Speaking of an absolute screw-up in terms of future adaptations, minor spoilers beyond Volume 5, but Kumiko's parallel minds acting weird after beating Mother is actually a pretty big deal in the story. Not only does it weird her out that her thought process is diverging, it creates a bit of an identity crisis that she's scared to draw attention to, or even turn the skill off, because their views might even overwrite her own. This is set up for later in the story, especially with how they react to seeing an elf for the first time. This is foreshadowing for the Demon Lord and Potamus's relationship, that the two know one another, and Ariel fucking hates Potamus's guts. Justifiably. Potamus is the worst. But while that's flavor early on, the volumes after where the anime ends explores the idea a lot more. See, the books say in volume 5 that she solved her rogue parallel minds problem by dumping them off in some eggs she laid. That impacts the direct next volume, as well as Julius's character development, which is a cascading effect later down the line. And it literally could have been fit into the show by trimming some of Kumiko's gags. Not even cutting them, just literally cutting back on a few lines. While Kumiko's storyline made it mostly intact, Shun's was butchered to hell. They did some strange reordering of events and cut others entirely. I still don't know why they moved the Earthworm attack to before the field trip where Hugo tries to kill Shun in the anime, because that dragon attack is a direct result of Hugo's actions. That's when Faye gets the Kin Eater skill, and Shun gets traumatized by taking a life for the first time. That trauma is cut entirely, by the way, but I guess it's not a big deal. He gets over it in the books pretty quickly. But it does leave the implication of that thing just came out of nowhere despite originating from the labyrinth, which is pretty fucking far away from the kingdom. I think their motivation was that would be enough for Hugo to want him dead for outstaging him by killing a worm during class, but the entire point of that scene was to show just how far gone Hugo is. that he was willing to kill Shun just for besting him in class. They cut out him returning to the castle where he fought Renant, saved his brother and Cadia's parents, and also Anna's entire brainwashing arc. On the surface, those are pretty small issues, but that does set up Renant's relationship with Julius, and the entire reason he went to teach Shun a lesson that Julius struggled with, which is a recurring anchor in the books. It also showed the after effects of the brainwashing on the eldest prince, and Anna's guilt mostly stems from her perceived betrayal of the royal family. Those pent-up emotions are what drive her to jump in front of Wrath's blade at the end, making Shun use mercy and max out his taboo skill. I don't know if this really needs stated either, but the climactic battle in the Elf Forest takes place in a forest, not a barren wasteland. I get that it's easier to animate around and probably easier on the rendering software, but it's devoid of any personality. So yeah, if there was ever a point where something didn't make a ton of sense in the anime, it's because they cut an entire point of view that gives the background on why a character did a thing in the first place. I should probably make it clear by this point, I mean, we're only almost done with the video? The books and anime are different enough that it's noticeable in terms of when events happen and how they're covered. That's because the anime is kind of a grab bag of what it's adapting. It's taken the manga's visuals somewhat, like the abstract representation of Kumiko's internal monologues, but the manga's told chronologically and exclusively from Kumiko's perspective. Now that does have its own adaptational issues, but it's still a great way to handle her particular ramblings, because the books are often long stretches of Kumiko just bantering between herself and the audience through fourth wall breaks about her situation and what she's doing without relaying any actions. Further, while the manga tweaks some events for pacing, like the first episode directly adapts the manga's version of events, the anime flat out butchers much of the subtle world building and surprises in the story that come from the light novels. It's extra confusing, considering the designs for the characters and story are clearly taken from the novels in the anime, but the presentation and storyboards seem more based off the manga, creating a strange mix on what it chose to adapt, while needlessly shuffling events to make even less sense. Speaking of, here's a bonus section on why this anime just kinda sucks to watch. This is sadly probably the best looking Milipensi adaptation. The art isn't the issue, and if you look at the technical animation here, it's generally fine in a frame-to-frame sense, but the traditional animation segments suffer from some awful directorial decisions, and framing to the point that scale, spatial relationships, and flow of time aren't even straightforward. Like there's awkward fades between scenes, bridging scenes inserted that don't fill in any information, while cutting some important actions in scenes that would otherwise convey what's even happening. And also some strange decisions in the layout that make who's standing where feel confusing. Mundane conversations feel like a surreal fever dream visually, and that's on top of the jumbled mess that are the action scenes, where the animation is okay and energetic, but the framing lacks relationship to the setting, making most characters look like ragdolls flailing around. No, it's fine. I don't need to see what these characters are reacting to, or why not just stop on their legs during a crane shot. This is compounded by the too fast editing that gives you whiplash to the point that your brain barely has a chance to register what's even happening on screen before it's on to another quick cut. And of course, that's when they're trying to animate things, and not just doing shaky pans over stills with stock blood spurts. The biggest takeaway is the production might look fine on the surface, with serviceable art and competent frame-to-frame animation, but how those pieces fit together is a goddamn mess. The worst looking aspect of this series is, unfortunately, in the most engaging parts of the story. That would be Kumiko's segments. She's animated almost exclusively in CG, which means the camera gets to go extra crazy in her action scenes, making it even harder to follow, and the scope of the environments is often lost. On top of the goofy looking models, you sometimes get laughable moments, but it's still easy to get into because the content is engaging. Kumiko's doing her stuff, fighting for survival, and when she's not, she's engaging in a comedy routine with herself that, crazy enough, the unhinged direction actually enhances by being so abstract and metaphorical with its scenes. Soma Spider So What is the story of two people in the first 5 volumes, or first 24 episodes of the anime. Shun's story is cut to pieces, lacking the development it desperately needs. Like, we follow him from birth in the books, so his time in the academy isn't all we see, and Kumiko's mundane leveling, skill acquisition, and numerous fights are essential to her development as a character. It's how we see her mindset come about, the influences of the system, and the shocking reveal that administrators exist. How the audience comes to identify with her is through her progression from low-tier monster to absolute legend. and that's somewhat lost when we don't see her experimenting with her skills to come to a new understanding and mastery that directly impacts her fights later on. So I'm a Spider, So What is an interesting franchise to talk about. The anime is a fairly well-received shit show that definitely deserved better, and the novels have a good story that's told in an offbeat and quirky way. I would talk more about the manga, but like I said, it's told chronologically from Kumiko's perspective, and that has its own issues of ruining the story despite otherwise being a pretty good adaptation. In fact, if you don't want to read the books, the manga is probably your next best way to get into this series, but personally, I'm not done talking about this series just yet. I've got at least another video in the works, one where I'll speak more about the books themselves rather than the anime's adaptation of it. But for now though, hey, you've made it to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and do all the other YouTube stuff to help the channel grow. You can also join my Discord with the link down in the description, and if you really want to support me, you can head on over to my Patreon or hit up my channel memberships. And speaking of supporters, I'd like to give a special thanks to JMonth33A, Pokeflute, Robin DBL, Tristan, and Vonstrom for their continued support. Thanks for watching.